Welcome back to the panel discussion, Consolidating Mission Critical Systems in Today's Public Sector Environment, sponsored by Unisys Federal here on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. Our guests today are Jeff Porter, Director of Platform Technologies in the CIO Office of Fairfax County, John Kunzier, Forward Marketing Leader at Unisys, Jason Kimry, Director of Federal Sales at Intel, Bernie Mazer, the CIO of the Interior Department, and Sean Torpy, Director for Infrastructure and Operations Services at the FAA. And we've been talking about virtualization. We've been talking about moving to the cloud, balancing what you put in the cloud versus what you keep in your internal data center, all of those issues. Implicit behind all of this, though, is the idea of continuing to optimize the infrastructure you're using for cost, for performance, for a lot of factors, energy consumption. So why don't we spend this segment a little bit talking about that whole idea of optimizing the infrastructure. And again, we'll start with John Kunzier, who is giving you, since you have a wide view over many agencies and customers, what is the optimized data center in 2014, whether it's a cloud or in a entity, look like?
So what we see in the data center is a movement, a continued movement to more virtualization, where we're actually trying to put more and more workloads on fewer and fewer servers. But we're also starting to see additional growth in other aspects like virtualizing my network, virtualizing my security and my storage. We're also seeing new technologies come into the market. For a good example, Gartner calls it bare metal virtualization. In a Unix environment, we would call that partitioning, where that environment actually provides different characteristics, where maybe I get less density, but I'm still optimizing that because I'm getting better performance and security characteristics. So we're starting to see some new and interesting ideas come into the market, whether it's Unisys or other organizations delivering those types of environments. The goal for us is to really help our customers get to that point where they do get that optimization that they're looking for, and really looking at leveraging almost that standardization around an Intel-based platform. And we're seeing, and what we see in the future is that all x86 Intel-based platform being that platform of the future around a cloud environment, whether it's public, private, or mission-critical cloud.
All right, and Sean, at the FAA, you've indicated that internal data centers, internal clouds, if you will be part of your future for the foreseeable future. So what are you doing to model what you want those data centers to look like in terms of optimizing?
Well, really just following off what we were just talking about with virtualization. Virtualization is key for getting ready to give you options, whether you stay internal, whether you go to an externally hosted environment, a cloud environment, public, private, or what have you. So we're really focusing on that. We've done a lot of virtualization within our data centers in preparation for going to cloud. But I think the next step that we're seeing is then concentrating on the applications and the tenants that are hosted within that cloud, so that they can take or they can have the benefits of cloud from an elasticity standpoint, self-healing type applications, so they can expand and contract depending on demand. So that's just doing a deeper dive into the tenants themselves, making sure that we're virtualized, but then taking a harder look at our applications, so then we have options as far as hosting is concerned.
And Jason, it looks like the x86 kind of has become the de facto architecture now for modern computing. And so do servers built for virtualization look the same as any other server? Or what do you see as the technologies most coming into play for optimized data centers going forward?
Well, I think x86 has been the direction for a while, but the place where it's been excluded to some extent is in that mission critical space. And I think that's where you're really seeing a lot of features and enhancements come to really address those unique requirements. So we certainly are addressing virtualization with every feature that every new product that we come out with adds new virtualization capabilities to reduce overhead. But what we also do is we've added a lot of RAS features, reliability features, serviceability features, to really enhance and enable customers to feel much more comfortable about moving mission critical workloads to an x86 platform without any concerns about reliability. And now we're seeing 5 nines pretty much across the board with industry standard platforms. And then the other piece is security. You're seeing continuously adding new security capabilities, things like Secure OS, Secure Key, things that we're doing, really just trying to minimize the possibility of failures in the data center when you're running on low-cost, open architecture-based systems.
And Jeff, you mentioned in Fairfax, of course, you've been on this internal cloud kind of operating way for the past 5 years. But, of course, once you build a data center, then you begin to rebuild it for the next round of technology. So what are your plans in terms of optimizing what you have experience with for the next round? And we should probably also mention, besides cloud and virtualization, the third big leg of modern computing is mobility. And I imagine you've got mobile users, and that's increasing. So that's something you have to take into account when optimizing a data center.
Well, as the technology changed in the Intel space with the different cores, we're reassessing all our applications. So we have to perform workload studies on all applications. So as we got to the cloud, we did a workload study on each application. At first, we had 900 physical servers running all the different applications. When we looked at some of these servers, they were running 5 to 10% utilization. So we take an application, do a study here, and then that was our strategy of putting them together. Because all things really are not virtually works in a virtual environment efficiently. So we took what we could and moved that over. So we really got down to about 40 physical servers hosting the 900 servers. Now, you said something about mobility. Mobility is real huge. We have our healthcare workers, our family service workers out in the field, and they want to be in the field and meeting with their clients and their constituents instead of coming back to the office. So we've been rolling out different things to allow them on their tablets and stuff to actually go out to the field, have a secure connection back to it, and actually in the household do stuff that they can connect back to the data centers and databases securely on the backside. So as we keep progression there, we're being forced with technology, because really all the end users now have technology in their hand, whether it's a iPad or a Windows tablet or something, or a smartphone. Everybody, the whole world is changing, and even the young kids, everybody has a smartphone. So the consumerization of IT is really driving us. People come to work and say, I have this at home, why can't I use this at work? So that's another big thing, bring your own device to work initiative. But doing that, we have to make sure security is there. So we put some things in place so they can bring their own device to work, and we're starting to roll that out and actually do work on that instead of having a whole tool belt, work for phones, this for work, this for home, this is, to talk to the kids or whatever. So we're still trying to do some efficiencies and drive IT forward.
All right, and Bernie, at Interior, of course, you're looking at these things from a CIO council standpoint and from an Interior standpoint, and you've done a lot of study of virtualization and come up with ratios for what are good norms when you virtualize servers and applications.
What we have done is, as part of the FDCCI and all that, is identify metrics that we're going to use for our core data centers. So within virtualization, we're working on ratios in terms of the number of virtualized operating systems per the total operating systems. We're looking at virtual operating systems in the context of the density of where they are. We're also looking at in terms of virtual host as a percentage of the total service that we're having. And that's the movement that we're having. As we're consolidating or closing data centers and all that, virtualization plays a necessary element in all of that as to where we're moving those applications from one place to another. When I look at when you brought up the aspect of mobility, the Department of Interior and all that, we cover 25% of the American landscape, and we have a mobile workforce. And so what we're looking at is what kind of devices and all that people are using and all that to be able to enable them to do their job. A couple of days ago, there was the government was, it said, in the press it says closed, but actually it was telework ready. And our workforce actually worked from wherever they were, and rather than opposed to the facilities. So they could have been using iPads, they could have been using tablets, they could have been using a whole lot of different things and all of that, but we had those that they were all available and all that for our workforce to do. As we move things to the cloud, what we're looking at is, within the context of applications, is how the appropriate thinness of the client, if you will, as to what can be placed on devices. because the era of the 17-inch screen or how we were doing the presentations in the past, they're slowly going away, and people want to have something in their hand and all that to be able to do their applications as well as the communications of enable them to do their job.
All right, so John, what does that do to the data center and to the whole architecture when, say, there is a mobile app, and yet you want it architected such that the logic is in the data stay back in the data center on one architecture and operating system, the device in hand is on another one? How does that all work?
Well, that's a tough question, and I'm not sure I can answer that in 3 minutes, but I'll give it a try. I think when we begin to look at it starts really, number one, how do I actually architect that application and really put the best practices in the way that we develop those applications. So whether it's a mobile app or whether it's a database type application, you begin to look at that. And how do I limit the exposure, the footprint, the profile of that application and the data that's out there? The other part of it is when we begin to look at the virtualization technologies, we need to think about that we wrap security around those components. One of the things at Unisys that we've done, and we don't talk enough about, is our environments have had one vulnerability since 2002. And the reason being is because we wrapped a lot of that security into the way that we deliver that environment on an x86 platform. And you don't get to that level of security and lack of vulnerability by not focusing on that. As we begin to move to a mobile application, we need to think about wrapping those applications and those critical applications, like your healthcare workers, that are doing things at home where patient confidentiality is a big deal, is cloaking that information as it goes across that open wire. And when we begin to look at that, I mean, those are the types of things as we think about people tapping into that information, whether it's individual information, whether it's very top level information. We want to be able to think about it in each one of those segments so that we have a solution, because one solution never is enough when we're talking about those components and driving it out. Optimization is great, but without security, it's not worth doing. So I think as those considerations begin to be critical to the way that we think about how we build, deploy those apps, and then the infrastructure we wrap around it.
Sure. And Sean, I wanted to ask you, too, about another aspect of security, I guess you could call it that, and that's power consumption and the lack of vulnerability to power fluctuations or power losses, and also optimizing power consumption for all the green that's going on in government. That's another mandate, too, that relates to this whole idea of infrastructure optimization. So what are you doing there?
Sure. Well, that's a real big concern of ours. What we have done is, and what we kind of realized was that in order to become efficient in that manner, that was one of the main pushes for us to go to the cloud, because internal data centers as a whole within a federal space, it takes a lot of money to run those, and it takes a lot of government workers, but also takes a lot of resources and what have you. And in order to do it efficiently, we weren't really budgeted in the best manner to do that. So what we have done was get out of our data centers what we could get out and migrate towards what will be our cloud offerings, but also taking a look at just more efficient ways of running our servers, running our data centers, procedures, looking at best practices within the industry, looking at the commercial space and what they're doing. That's a lot of what we're doing as far as we're honing in on what we're going to do with our internal data centers for the long term.
And Jason, give us an idea of what some of the technologies coming on that will help that whole idea of power consumption, because I know there's a lot going on from the chip through the whole blade level there.
Well, every generation you just see these massive power improvements. So what we tend to see is in a typical data center, 80% of the power is actually consumed by 20% of the servers, and that 20% tends to be the ones that are 5 years or older. So it's just critical to look at the age of the infrastructure and make sure that you're not just keeping old servers alive just because you think it's cheaper, because you'll quickly find out that just the power efficiencies that we get out of every time we move to a new manufacturing process, you just get this tremendous performance gains every year, and with that, equal power savings.
All right, and Bernie, we'll give the last 90 seconds to you. What is the CIO Council and what's Interior's thinking in terms of best practices for energy optimization as you modernize your infrastructure?
Jason highlighted a very important element, and that's regards of the older equipment, the power efficiencies, the power effectiveness is not there. And so, it's incumbent upon an organization, if they're going to maintain their data centers and all that, is to have current or more current technologies and all that to be able to deliver the effectiveness there. The Department of the Interior, we're an environmentally conscious organization. The Secretary is very strong on we are stewards of our landscape, and we try to be green stewards and all that and everything that we do, not only in our interactions with the American public, but how we conduct ourselves as well. So like within our core data centers, we're going to be metering those. But we're also looking at the utilities of moving things to the cloud and through the concepts of virtualization or getting the more current technologies. Because the costs associated with maintaining old, aging infrastructure and all that is we haven't really got a good calculus on it. But we know it's burdensome to to be good stewards.
And very quickly, do you look at the power consumption practices of your cloud providers also?
In the responses back from the cloud providers and all that, we do have an eye to how they're responding to those things. We're not really going to get into the mechanics of how they're constructing themselves, but I think if their motives and all of that are appropriate, they know is if you're energy conscious, energy stewards and all of that, you are going to be saving a lot of money in terms of how you're delivering those types of services internally.
All right, that brings our discussion to a close. Lots of great topics today. I'd like to thank our guests, Bernie Mazer, CIO of the Interior Department, Sean Torpy, Director of Infrastructure and Operations Services at the FAA, Jeff Porter, Director of Platform Technologies in the CIO's office at Fairfax County, John Kunzier, Forward Marketing Leader at Unisys, and Jason Kimry, Director of Federal Sales at Intel. I'm Tom Temin, federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM.